From the heights of Saddle Butte to the depths of the LaPorte Slough, this is the Trent Klarenbach Podcast. Today's guest is a friend of mine, Eugene Hritzuk, a household name when I was growing up in Saskatchewan in the 1980s and early 90s. A very interesting individual. I think you'll enjoy this conversation as much as I'm looking forward to it. Eugene, how are you today?
Fine, Trent. Enjoying the great weather and looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah, I think it'll be great. And you're pretty active with the golfing. And
Yeah. In the summertime, I do a fair bit of golfing. Kind of keeps me in shape for curling in the winter, and it fills the gap between the frozen water to the cool beers in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about curling here. Growing up, you're a household name. You're literally a household name in Saskatchewan growing up. So you're kind of a bit of a rock star in the curling circles, I would say, for sure. And let's talk about that a little bit. You've been curling probably in this curling scene for how much, like 5 decades? Or
Well, yeah, actually, I've been curling for 65 years competitively, but my first foray into the big lights was in 1985. I represented Saskatchewan in the Brier, and that's now 40 years ago. Yeah, just over 40 years old. And since then, I represented the province in men's, seniors, and masters curling, total of 14 times. I won a couple Canadians, and in 2009 had the good fortune of being with 3 other great guys and winning the World Senior Men's Curling, which was held in Dunedin, New Zealand, which is the first time ever that the World Curling had a international world championship in the Southern Hemisphere. So we curled in Dunedin, New Zealand. It was great time down there. I recall one morning we finished our curling game and then headed out across the grassy area of the arena and played 18 holes of golf in amongst penguins walking up the beaches along the golf course. Quite an experience, I'll tell you.
no way. That's incredible. Well, New Zealand, that's not exactly a hot spot for curling, is it? Or is it?
No, but it's interesting. When curling became an Olympic sport, World Curling became the recipient of some huge dollars as a result. And the first curling was an Olympic sport in 1988, and then it became an official Olympic sport shortly thereafter. World Curling received as their share of the Olympics something like $18 million. And so they decided that they should put that toward promoting curling and getting it beyond Canada, which still to this day has more curlers than the rest of the world combined. Yeah. And they decided to build a year-round dedicated curling facility in Naseby, which is in New Zealand, not too far from Dunedin. And that money went toward that club there, which I guess rekindled. There was a deep history of Scottish curling in New Zealand, but this rekindled the interest and enthusiasm for the sport. And as a result, the sport grew in New Zealand, and World Curling decided to be a good opportunity to even promote it further beyond a dedicated 4-sheet curling facility and host the World Curling Championships there. And it was interesting, the 4-sheet curling facility, we practiced there for the week prior to the Worlds, and it was, the way they ran it was similar to the way you book a racquetball court or whatever. It was 1-hour intervals, and we saw on the other sheets that we weren't on, families from grandparents to grandchildren coming there, and most everybody used a stick, because if you're not an experienced curler, to come out on the ice to slide without falling or hurting yourself is a bit of a challenge. So pretty much everybody that came that curled with a stick, and they'd walk out and give the rock a push, and were quite adept at executing shots. So it was really interesting to see how curling's evolving in some of these other countries, and New Zealand's one of them. That's actually, it's grown significantly too. So
that's interesting. Well, you just brought up a point too of the agility and the balance required to navigate the ice. as you get older, I mean, if you keep that up.
It's tougher. Like for me, now I'm 76, so the body doesn't bend like it used to. Doesn't have the strength, doesn't have the balance or the stamina. So it's a lot more challenging. And consequently, I relegated myself mostly to curling recreationally, competitive recreational curling now. But oh yeah, I'm way past my best before date, that's for sure. But I'm still loving it. It's been a passion of mine for over 50 years, and it's not going to go away. That's for sure.
Well, that's great. That's a great sport. You can start when you're young, continue it when
Yeah, I'll still continue curling. I don't have to resort to the stick, but when my body protests too much, I'll probably go with the stick because it's surprisingly easy to curl with a stick, and it gives you still that opportunity to participate in the sport, go up and down the ice, get some exercise, and enjoy the sociability that comes with curling. So that'll always be a part of me, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think getting in and out of the hack and the sweeping and walking on the ice, that has to benefit one as they get older.
Oh, it's great. You typically in a curling 8-in curling game, you'll going up and down the ice, you'll do well over a kilometer of walking, and that just travel distance. There is the brushing, the exercise. It does have, depending to the extent that you want to apply yourself, it does have a good aerobic benefit to you, because if you give it while you're walking and brushing, you'll have to pause to catch your breath out there sometimes. So you can participate at whatever level you want to, but you're right. Up until as long as I'm going to be able to walk out the ice, I can give her as much as I want and still get the benefit of the exercise from it.
And you're walking on ice, pebbled ice, so it's slippier.
Yes,
You do that with what on your bottom of your shoe, right?
Yes,
A slider.
yeah, with a slider. Right,
You want the more slip.
for the stick curling, they have shoes that are very similar to broom ball shoes. Okay, so that's a good thing, because again, balance is more of an issue with age. So if you've got this type of footing out there, it's actually very safe and very easy to participate in it. So
Okay. I know you always hear the story of, well, when you're younger, there's a curling ball spill in small communities, always someone taking a tumble, right? Oh, they usually help. There's usually they've been assisted with that through.
unfortunately, I've seen a lot of tumbles. That hasn't been me yet, but I've seen a lot of tumbles out there. But
Yeah.
and again, as you get on in years, I'm more involved in coaching now, which again still keeps me connected to the sport. And a few years ago, I was contacted through some work I was doing just out of interest on trying to understand the science behind brushing, and being quite active on the social media. I got a call from World Curling, and they asked if I was interested in doing some fairly specific research on the science behind brushing. And luckily, I got connected with another person from the University of Saskatchewan and the College of Engineering, a professor by the name of Dr. Sean Ma. And he was a competitive speed skater in his younger years. He was now lecturing at the U of S and the College of Engineering. And through speed skating, he also had a curiosity and an interest in how things slide on ice, and specifically the skate blades, because as a competitive speed skater, he found that there were certain conditions that lent itself to faster skating, better cornering, and whatever else it was to speed skating, and realized that there's certain dynamics with ice and the interaction of things sliding over ice that didn't have answers to it. In some situations you could skate faster, others slower, but why? They knew maybe it was, and I don't know, it could be because it was warmer outside. You could go faster, but why? Why was it slipperier? And so I got into this whole study and research of why is ice slippery, first of all? What makes it more slippery? And what does brushing do to the ice to make it more slippery? Because it does that. A rock, when you brush it, will slide further. It'll go straighter. And they have found out on the flip side, if you can make a rock go straighter, maybe you can make it curl more. And you can. It's become a whole topic of directional brushing. So right now, we've got over 140 articles in our literature review that most of which I read. I shouldn't say most of which I read, some of which I read several times because there's some really interesting science behind all of this. So I've gotten really deep into curling, but sort of from behind the scenes now. And I'm as involved as I've ever been with the sport, but in a different way. So it's really been interesting and lots more lots more to study and learn about this. We've just, again, touched the tip of the iceberg, or should I say the tip of the pebble?
Yeah, so you'd have, like, I don't know, just from a little high level look at it, there's probably something to do with room temperature and ambient temperature, I guess, right?
Well, it's very interesting what I found out. There has been decades of research done to try to find out what makes ice slippery. And at about minus 30 degrees Celsius, the surface of ice isn't slippery. It's like walking on plywood. But as it gets warmer, it becomes slipperier. But why is that? And they found out it was called atomic microscopy. They were able to determine that typically when ice freezes, the H2O molecules interlock and form a fairly stable matrix. And it's interesting also when the H2 molecules stabilize and lock in together, they actually expand. And that's why ice, if you've got ice in a glass bottle, or water glass bottle, freezes, it'll break it. It can impart tens of thousands of pounds of pressure at this point when these H2 molecules lock together. But here's what happens on the surface of ice that is exposed to air temperature that's a bit warmer. These molecules dislodge and become unstable and rather active, and they'll become more so the more you warm it, up to the point that it becomes water. So there is an effect on the surface of ice when you warm it up that it gets to be like marbles on a hardwood floor. It becomes slippery. It becomes more marbly or more slippery as you warm it up again, up to a limit.
Yeah.
And then as it becomes liquid, then a bunch of other dynamics kick in there when it becomes wet or sticky. Even it can get sticky when it gets a little bit wet. If you've ever curled in natural ice, it only gets so warm, it's really keen, and then it gets too warm and it starts sticking. So trying to understand all of this and put it together to understand the science behind why rocks curl, why brushing works, has been really interesting, and I'm looking forward to a lot of years more of this too.
Absolutely. Well, I always understood that the brushing kind of melted the ice a little bit. Is that right?
Well, no. Here's the thing. We've tested what brushing does to the ice through macrophotography. That is, we will photograph the tops of pebble before a rock goes over and your brushing goes over, and then have somebody brush through it and bring the camera into the exact same spot and photograph it. There's some interesting characteristics that evolve as a result of a rock going over. A rock is very abrasive, scratches the heck out of pebble. A curling broom, in response to your comment, it actually warms the tops of the pebble because we've used infrared video cameras to record, and we can pinpoint the tops of the pebble, what the temperatures are just before and right after. And we have found that brushing can warm up the ice with the people we've used up to about 2 degrees Celsius. Now, curling ice was usually at -4 or -4.5 Celsius. So by it warming up 2 degrees, you're not actually melting it. But like I said, you're creating slipperiness. And this heat is causing the tops of the pebble or the ice to become, again, the H2O molecules more active, and as a result, more slippery. So it doesn't melt the ice, but warms it up to create slipperiness is what it does.
Yeah, I would never have thought curling would get that technical and to be a study into why ice is slippery.
And here's another thing. There's certain techniques that are more effective in warming up the ice. And so, through studying what's happening to the ice, we can watch different techniques and see what it actually does to the ice. So there's lots more for you.
Not just in the type of the broom, but also in the pattern, the motion.
Well, you're right. It's, the speed, the pressure of the stroke, the length of the stroke, all of these come into play. And so we've found that there's certain dynamics here that affect the change the ice more than others. So,
And they change with the ice condition.
yes, that it's the type of water you use, the size of pebble you use, the air temperature, the ice temperature. By varying the ice temperature by half a degree is very significant. More and more nowadays they use distilled water versus osmosis water because it's fairly pure. It has very, very few dissolved minerals in it, and just it's very hard and very crisp. So that is so much comes into play there too. Yes, with the ice.
So there's a home ice advantage.
There is a whole ice advantage, yeah.
Because I guess I haven't curled much my life, but you'd hear the complaints about the ice maker, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes someone was filling in, it wasn't necessarily always as good as the regular kind of deck. So that's interesting. So 65 years? Yeah, 65 years ago, curling. I started high school curling.
Elementary school, with my parents lived on a farm. They came into town, and I tagged along with them. And it was a 2-sheet ice in St. Walburg, Saskatchewan, natural ice. And if a game ended early, I still recall going on the ice, and I can still visualize myself doing this because it was so exciting for me, such a novel experience. I put both feet in the hack, push out, run out with a stone, and then jump on it with my knees and go down the ice twirling on the knees. Yeah.
You remember that?
I still remember that feeling because that was such a unique feeling for me. Be like floating through the air, rotating. And then, when I was 10 years old, I had to decide whether it was going to be hockey or curling. And I had a cousin that was a hockey player. And I remember it was one Saturday, my parents were curling in a bonspiel at St. Walburg at the curling rink, which was next to the arena. And my cousin invited me to come to a hockey practice, whatever it was, PV, I don't know what you'd call it. And I said, well, I really can't skate because I couldn't skate. So he said, well, you can be the goalie. So I put on the goalie pads, and I mean, those were horsehair leather goalie pads. They each weighed about 20 pounds. Yeah, dry. And I put them on, and there was no such thing as a face mask back then, and had the equipment.
And then the little cell thing on your chest, probably.
I don't know. I did have something, a little felt protector on my chest, but I'll never forget. I was screened on a shot, and the puck whizzed by my ear to the point that I felt it nick my ear. Oh, just missed it, and I go, "Holy crap! That could have really hurt me." And later on in that hockey practice, I got another shot. And again, kids don't have that hard to a shot, but I still recall it glanced off my collarbone, and of course, as you just mentioned, you had a pad that didn't cover much, and it just glanced off my collarbone, hurt like heck. And so practice is over, and I went back to the rink and watched my parents just calmly sliding down the ice, having a good time, laughing, and I was enthralled by the strategy and what Rocks are doing. I said, I could have been killed out there in hockey practice. I like curling. And so honestly, I chose to curl at that age, and I've been curling ever since.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I mean, that was I think things happen for us, not to us. And whether you had in goal, if you had a bit of forward or something, you might have stayed playing hockey, but that put you on your path to curling, right? The worst position in hockey. So, the St. Walburg, and you didn't spend the entire life out there living.
No, I stayed there till I went to university in 1967, and my parents had a mixed grain farm there. We at that time, I think we were calving out close to 100 cows, so it was not the greatest land. It was very rocky, undulating, wasn't that productive, but it was good for mixed farming. And we had cattle, we had pigs, we had horses, we had chickens, we had everything. And once I went to university in 1967, I kind of broke away from all of that and got involved as a phys ed teacher, coaching sports, curling more, and curled at the university level. And that was in the days of playing against Rick Folk and Ed Lukowicz.
Oh, wow.
To represent the U of S, and I couldn't get by those guys, but I still enjoyed the sport and continued curling. And when teaching in Broadview from 1972 to 1975, and in those 3 years, I love sports. I love participating in sports mostly. I realized that I was spending all my time coaching and hardly any time playing. I played baseball in the summer. That was about the extent of it. Yeah. So I decided in 76, had an opportunity when my father-in-law at that time was considering retiring from farming. He had a farm down at Lorburn, and I used to help him on weekends with seeding and in the fall with harvest. And I just marveled at how easy it was to farm on that land. It was flat. It was lighter soil. It wasn't that productive. I remember back then getting 25 bushel coppels, about par, but it was level land, no stones, no fence lies. It was just so much easier to farm than up in St. Warbur, where you could walk from one corner of a quarter section to another on rocks. It was that laden with stones. And then it gave me my winters off, which I could pursue curling. And so in 76, as I left St. Walbert when teaching, and I got back into farming in 76 in Marburn and started spending my winters curling.
Well, I found it a similar experience in St. Walbert. My grandfather, Klarenbach, when their family bought some land in St. Walbert, it was the first land they bought. I believe St. Walbert, and he went up there and they just couldn't make it work. It was poor land that they purchased, and it just ended up walking and riding his bicycle back down to LaPorte, down to LaPorte area, and eventually that's where we started farming. Yeah. But same idea, it could different land conditions. Yes, right. Yeah, Northern would be similar to
the family farm's still up there, and of course, my brother, he cows out about 250 cows. Yeah, so it's lends itself better to, I think, pasture and meat cattle than it does to grain. So
yeah. So down in Lorburn, 76, things are rocking and rolling on farm.
Well, that was really interesting, and I watch what's happening today in farming, and it makes me wonder why it is the way it is. Because here was my experience in 1976 when I decided about 75, I was my last year of teaching, so I had that winter off, which I curled in 1976. I put my first crop in. My father-in-law helped me out. He said, Eugene, you clean whatever wheat seed you need, because wheat's easy to grow here, easy to store, and the world is always hungry for bread. He says it's a good thing to grow. So I hauled the grain to the wheat pull elevator there where they had a cleaner, clean enough that I needed for seed. And we recorded the non-board wheat prices in April of 1976. And my father-in-law says, look, when harvest is over, you haul back to the elevator the equivalent value of this seed that you purchased now, and we'll be square. So I went ahead and did it. And one other thing I should add, also, I acquired a quarter section of land, my first quarter section of land, and then rented a lot of land for my father-in-law, and got it through Farm Credit. They had it appraised. It was $50,000 a quarter in 1976. So I purchased a quarter section of land, and as my father-in-law said, he had just gone through, I don't know if you recall, in the early 70s, that's when we had surplus of grain, no markets, growing great crops, and farmers were bartering wheat for $1 a bushel, buying implements and vehicles, trucks, whatever. And in 76, it gotten up to $7 a bushel, and I said, boy, it can go do nothing but go up. That was my idea. It's pointed up. It's just going to keep going. That fall, when I hauled the wheat back from harvest back to the elevator to pay off my father-in-law, non-board prices were $4.50 a bushel. It dropped $2.50 in that 1 year, and I started scratching my head. But I was already committed I just, couldn't understand how I could be so wrong that it was only going to be good. And and the thing about it, and you and I have spoken about this before. About 20 years later, I had to get that same quarter section appraised for the banks, and it appraised at $55,000 a quarter. In 20 years, it appreciated by 10%, and it was in a 20 years. Anybody's aware, the buying power of the dollar, the cost of everything had gone up significantly, and I was losing ground on my farm. It literally, I was barely making a living out of it. So I started, because I had the winters off, took on some off-farm jobs and brought in some income. And I got into commercial real estate, which gave me a lot of flexibility, and that allowed me to maintain the farm. But I also had to hire a hired man for that, and I had a really good person by the name of Barry Davies, who was a retired teacher who I used to play ball with, and he loved farming. And I recall those years when I was getting into commercial real estate and carrying on the farm, that at the end of the year, my hired man was making more money than I was on the farm. And I'm going, why am I doing this? And I kept telling myself, well, it's got to come back. And 2005, I just gave up. I said, listen, I'm out of here. I had my auction sale. And there's an interesting story at my auction sale. There was another farmer around Norburn that had an auction sale the year previously. And he came up to me, and I knew that he had been, sort of lost because he had nothing to do. And he came up to me after he had his auction sale. I talked to him, and he says to me, well, Eugene, he says, so does this kind of make you feel sad now that this is all over for you? And I thought for a few seconds, and I said, the only thing that makes me sad is I feel for the farmers that are left out there. Every part of this industry that is not going anywhere. That 25, this is nearly 30 years, and it just hadn't kept up with.
Yeah, it wasn't going anywhere.
It wasn't going anywhere for 30 years, which really got.
Well, when I had similar conversations, so when I quit, I think it was 2006, I think was maybe my last year. And I had people telling me that I was lucky because I had a university degree, I was able to get a good job, and they said they felt trapped, that they didn't really have any other economic prospects, really. And a few years later, they were asking me if I wished I had quit. We're sad that I quit farming, and I had nothing to be sad about because I wasn't making any money. Yeah, it's one eye on the weather, on the clouds, looking for a rain cloud, and the other one looking to see if who's phoning me wanting money, right? Yeah. It goes through, very little to be in the miss, right? And that's the way it was. But yeah, it was a different time, right? Like it was, you go from the seesaw hype in the 70s. Yep. Probably peaked in 81, and then it got pretty low in the 90s again, and then again in the early 2000s. Yes. Yeah. But then you went into commercial real estate full time.
Yes, I was doing it sort of part time, and then I decided that hey, have an auction sale, get out of it, and just do commercial real estate, which has been a good decision as far as I'm concerned. Not only for my livelihood, but just for peace of mind. I don't think I could have tolerated the stress, as you said. It always seemed like you're looking over your shoulder for one thing or another. Well, it wasn't the rain cloud, it was the banker or somebody else chasing you. But also commercial real estate gave me the freedom, the opportunity to pursue curling and just have more time on my hands. And also it's still, I enjoy the interaction of people, the financial aspects of any business, and the challenges of what I refer to as making real estate babies. I just do commercial real estate. I chose that because residential real estate, a house is a house is a house. You can drive down the street in the commercial sector of Saskatoon and see a few buildings that are maybe a bit run down and go, boy, if you bought that, knocked it down, and put a big new building here, wouldn't that be good? And as a result, I've been involved in a number of redevelopment sites in Saskatoon. Like it used to be the Princess Auto Sales Sports corner. It's now Princess Autos on that corner. I sold it to a developer who built the Princess Auto building at the time. Princess Auto came to Saskatoon. They were in a growth mode. They were in a small building on Avenue C. They needed to expand to this bigger format. But because they wanted their financial resources directed toward growing the company and promotion and products and marketing, they didn't want to tie up their equity in bricks and mortar, the real estate. So when I sat down with the president of Princess Auto that time, interestingly enough, he was a curling fan too, so we had a good connection. And he said, if you can, we identified at the corner there, it's Parkland Plastics at the time. They made plastic water tanks and whatnot else there. And I knew he wanted to sell that corner, and so I contacted a friend of mine, a developer out of Calgary. His name was Russ Butler, who owned Wholesale Sports. I said, Russ, you wanted to venture into some development here. How about you buy this 5-acre corner and we do a building for Princess Auto? And literally, sitting across the table from the president of Princess Auto on my cell phone to Russ Butler in Calgary, we did that deal. And that was one of many. I've got I've done projects at Kindersley, the retail where you come in, where there's right next in front of Walmart with Sobeys liquor store all the way to Pet Value, and there's the co-op service station in the corner. Working on another big project up in Meadow Lake as a retail development project. Did the just north of Saskatoon bedroom community of Martinsville, sold 45 acres to a developer and said, let's do this retail strip here because I've got prospects for you. If you ever go up to Warming, you'll see it'll start out with a Tim Hortons and a pharmacy, and a KFC, and it'll go on to a co-op service station, McDonald's, Princess or Canadian Tire, and on and on. And I just sold a site there, the next parcel for a Sobeys grocery store, which is in the works now. So again, I really enjoy making real estate babies. Seeing a piece of dirt and making something grow and happen, mature, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, fulfilling, right?
Oh, it is. Like you have a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And the beauty of waking up every morning is there's always projects out there. I just have to search them out, and then I have the challenge again of creating that new real estate baby and getting it mature and moving on. So it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Well, you and I met through real estate. I remember the day I met you in our building. Right? One was actually something I said to my wife, I like this guy. He said, no, I like him. Anyways, yeah, the whole commercial real estate thing I haven't been involved in, but I've always been just watching what's happening in Kindersley, and I think, how do you fill these buildings? All of a sudden I see some shovels in the ground, whatever, right? And all of a sudden there's a sign on a building. Where did they come from? Why did they, I guess that's you. You connect.
Yes.
People with opportunities, I guess.
Fulfilling a need for somebody, and it's it is somewhat limited in Kindersley, but I've done a few projects for greenfield projects that were just dirt, and now there's the building and tenant and people renting it. A lot of the majority of the companies rent. They don't care to own the real estate. So the challenge and the opportunity is always there for me to make that connection between somebody that needs a certain type of building, size of building, so much a certain amount of land to function profitably in Kindersley, and find somebody that's got the depth to put this together. And of course, Ian Coots has been somebody that I've worked with closely. And in Kindersley, Terry Shea, I think both of the, I know that are, they're both kind of the godfathers of the industrial real estate market up there.
Yeah.
And it's been very interesting and rewarding.
Oh, yeah.
Doing that there too.
Absolutely. I think it's all, as the older you get, it's more about almost more about fulfillment. And I think enjoy. And yeah, seeing,
I really don't need it for my livelihood, but I sometimes think, like, how many cups of coffee could I drink in a day? How many games of golf could I golf in a week? I'm kind of there already, kind of in my mind, and I get away for a week here and there, heading out to Scotland with my son for 10 days of golfing here at the end of August. I'm heading actually next week to Bondsville in Houston, Texas. There's an arena ice curling club there. It's only on arena ice. There's 5 sheets of curling ice painted on this arena, and the Houston Curling Club gets ice for, I think it's 2 hours Thursday night and 2 hours Sunday morning. And when the Zamboni, after the hockey practice, leaves the ice, the crew comes in, and there's people torching up the spikes and the hack so that they melt into the ice. There's other group will get the rocks out of the walk-in cooler onto a trolley, bring them up to the ice. Somebody else pebbles. Somebody else scrapes down the real bad ridges from the Zamboni machine. And you're at it. In about 20 minutes, they're at it. And then at 2 hours, they got to be out of there. So they got to dismantle everything. And that's how dedicated they are to.
Wow.
So I'm going down. They have one annual spiel a year, and they've invited me to come down to be their guest curler for this thing. So I'm going, to Houston and to curl, and just really looking forward to coaching a ladies team out of Houston also. So and here's another interesting thing. So there's the Houston ladies curling team. It's skipped by a lady by the name of Julie Segovia. She was Julie Mills from Saskatchewan, and her dad, Ron Mills, played with Rick Folk when they won the men's world curling championships in 1980. Her dad, Ron, coached her in high school curling, coached her in junior while she was going to university taking her nursing degree. When she was finished nursing, she headed down to Houston because nursing paid way better in the States. Continued to study, got her doctor, and she's a Dr. Segovia. And she reconnected just by chance. As a result, I am coaching their team for the next year, and I coached them for part of last year. They lost the USA National Final, ended up with a silver medal. So I'm going back again this winter. And these ladies are so dedicated that because you only have the ice those 4 hours a week, you just can't go and practice like you can here, like you and I would. If we're interested, you go out and rink and practice. So they have to fly into either Denver or Minneapolis, where there's dedicated curling ice for a weekend if they want to train.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. Curling's a lot different in the States. There's about 21,000 curlers in the United States registered right now, half of which play on arena ice. The other half are in dedicated curling clubs.
Is that right?
So it's really interesting there. It's so much enthusiasm for curling, and we're going to see over the next few years, I think, a lot more dedicated curling clubs popping up in the States. They play year-round, virtually. And
Well, I kind of forgot about this story. I talked to somebody a few years ago, and they were American from LA or somewhere, and they're traveling up to Calgary or Saskatoon to curl, like to go curling camp or something, or join the league so they could get some develop their skills. It was like, wow, that's commitment.
yeah, there are a lot of curlers fly across the country in the States, and there are dedicated curling clubs along the northern part of the U.S. and along the East Coast. So if you're in Texas or Arizona or California, although Arizona does have the Coyote Curling Club in Tempe, it's a dedicated 4-sheet curling ice. And I think there's one in California now that people just fly all over the country, go curl.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. It's why I sort of got it's talk to my mother. When the Mossgill's on, she's watching the TV. It's a big sport. So you're curling. So you touched on it briefly. You went to the Brier.
For first time in 1985. Yep.
Yeah. And then you went how many times?
I went it's a second time in 1988, and then in 2002 I went to my first Canadian senior championships in St. Thomas, and I played in 6 senior nationals. And then once you become 60, you can curl in the masters. I curled in seniors, so when I was still 60, 1 year in 2014. I represented Saskatchewan in both the senior men's and the masters. And we curled the senior men's in Abbotsford. And Saturday night, we didn't make the playoffs. So Saturday night, we jump on a red-eye flight to Trois-Rivières, Quebec, to participate in the Masters Canadian Championships. So,
What would happen if you made the playoffs?
I wait a lot. We had to default the first game on Sunday, and if that would have happened, and that was a killer. So I bowed after that. I'm not playing both, so I just stuck to Masters and ended up going 6 times to the Canadian Masters. And my last kick at it, I guess, was 2018. So now it's been about 7 years, and like I said, I still curl competitively, but more research, more coaching to keep me involved.
Yeah, the research you mentioned, that sounds fascinating. I just never would have thought it would get to that.
Oh, there's just so much behind it. Like we've got 142 articles in our review of literature right now that relate to things about ice, rocks, and brushing, and so there's just so much more to be learned there.
Are the competitive curlers taking that information?
Well, they are and they aren't. Like, it's interesting. Competitive curlers, they tend to think that they can figure this out better, and to them, they don't care to know why. They just know what. They know if they do this, they can get this effect, and if they do that, they get that effect. What we're doing is understanding why that's happening, and I think if the curlers took the time and effort to understand that, they could make the what even better for what they're trying to do. So that's where we're taking the brushing is to a new level if you apply science behind what's going on and understand it. Yeah, there's a big controversy. There was this past winter over the foam that's used in these brushes, because these brushes, the longer our hair brushes, they've got a foam material in the base of the brush, and then they've got a nylon fabric that's wrapped around it. And manufacturers, there are some specifications on what you could do with the foam, but some of the manufacturers have been pushing the bar, and the effect it appeared to be and was too extreme, too drastic. They call it like almost like a joystick. Some of these booms that you could get a stone to curl so much more or so much less. In some cases, they said they could even make it slow down by brushing a certain way. So, we did a fair bit of research this winter on the foams, different foams that are used in these brushes, to determine the effectiveness at where the limit is, and what is it with these foam inserts that make them more effective. We've sort of resolved that and say, whoa, you got to back off on this element and that element in these foams. So the World Curling is this summer, I think, they're in the process of rewriting those standards for foam as a result of the research that we did this winter on these foams. So again, that's another element. And another thing that you were looking at, because heat's all related to friction and pressure, because when you're brushing, you actually warm up the top of the ice, which creates it, which makes it more slippery. So that's as a result of pressure and heat. So we're finding through studying the heat pattern after you brush. As I mentioned, we've got infrared video cameras that shoot down on the ice, and we can measure the heat on the tips of all the pebble, because again, as you have pebbled ice, the rocks slide on the tops of the pebbles. So that's all that we're interested in, and we're the only research that's ever been done studying the tops of the pebble. That's what we're focusing on. And so we're finding that depending on the type of brush and the manufacturer, this heat pattern across the ice isn't exactly the same. It's different from the outside edges of the brush to the middle. So that's another thing to consider. The effectiveness changes across the width and the length of the brush. But the interesting thing is, according to the rules, the pressure is supposed to be evenly distributed. We're finding it isn't. So now that's opening up another Pandora's box. Okay, what is it in the structure of this brush head that's causing it to change the pressure across the whole brush head? And it's mostly manufacturing structural issues that haven't been adhered to well enough, and the brush is flexing in certain spots and it isn't. So we're just getting to that now.
Well, and you can manipulate it. How do you test that? Because you can manipulate the pressure.
Oh yeah, you can. But here's another thing, and the brushes have gotten that way now, where the handle of the brush goes into the head. It has to be able to rotate 360 degrees, and you no longer have a static connection. It has to rotate, and without creating any more pressure from one side or the other. So all the brushes now have that pivoting handle in the head, and that prevents a person from changing the angle of the handle to create a different pressure. But here's another thing we found out. The more upright you are over a brush, the more force you could put down as a result. So really, you can affect the pressure. You can affect the heat from the brush end by the angle of the handle. So there's some studies related to that. We're looking at that. So it goes on and on. Like it's very, very interesting in my mind.
Well, absolutely. And it's such an extreme from the stereotype experience growing up. The players were the cigarettes, right? Yes, smoke fills, curling halls.
There used to be ashtrays on a sticking in a post on the sideboards by either the hog line or the house, so the skip could flick his ashes off into the ashtray. No, that's very open way. The more curlers are finding out that it's force and pressure and heat that's creates the brushing effectiveness. The more you find curlers are trying to get stronger so they can push out harder, heavier, and just getting more endurance and stamina so they can brush faster all the way down the ice, because that's another thing, the speed of the stroke. If you can overlap the stroke over top of one another, even a part of it as you're moving down the ice, you're going heat on top of heat. So now you're increasing the heat that much more, which is increasing the slipperiness, which is what brushing is all about, is making rock slide in.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned curlers getting stronger. Like, I guess curlers are always athletic, but now they're more athletes than they ever were in the past.
They are more athletic because they're finding those that are more athletic are more effective and they're winning. So, and there's good money. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars wagered out there with prize money each year, all these major events with the elite curlers. So, it's for some countries, for some teams, it's a small number of teams, but they're making a living at it now.
Wow, yeah, that's great. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, it's I guess an example just where years I've been playing sport, just how the science is really, I don't know, taking over, but it's certainly becoming more aware of the science.
Well, analytics are a big part of it, aren't there? No, just statistics on these teams and their history or their track record on how they perform under certain situations. That's being studied now. So curlers will approach certain teams a certain way because they know that they're more effective at their hitting game, for example. That's a more simplistic analytic, but they're finding that certain teams, if they're down at a point or two in a certain stage of a game, are very vulnerable, or others that are not vulnerable when they're down. They're more of a threat because, again, they analyze all their scores and see trends there.
So there's a Bill James of curling. There is, because I remember I got the Bill James baseball abstract back in the early mid 80s, and I might still have it because that thing was absolutely incredible. You could see how a hitter did as a 90 under a full move, all these different left-handed batters, whatever, right? And it just blew my mind. And now curling has...
Jared Gertz, who's head of, it's called the Curling Zone, is a person that's done a lot of work of this, and some teams that get him to provide them with the information and data. So it's curling's at an all new level, and there's actually this year there's going to be so it's the curling TCG. It's going to be a professional curling tour that they're setting up this winter with some of the top teams in the world. It hasn't been laid out yet, but it's in the works, so it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. So it's taking curling to a level which will be a livelihood for those teams playing at that level.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. Would that tour be North America or around the world?
It'll be around the world, and it may be the venues, the hosts, maybe in North America, but they're talking to have I think it's like 6 events, and Japan curling is very popular. In Japan, I know some of the top Japanese curlers have mentioned they can walk down the street, they get noticed by people. It's a big thing in Japan. It's big in China. Just sheer numbers in China tells you that there's opportunities there for developing some outstanding curlers, and they have some interesting programs that they run in China for developing curlers. I don't know what they still do, but I know a few years ago they would target kids that were good in things like gymnastics or swimming or whatever they felt the metrics were for a good curler, and they would bring him into a curling program at a very early age, and then that's what they spent their life doing, training to be a curler.
Well, that's Eastern Germany, and there's a different program. I'm not forced into this, are they? Like they do in Russia.
Well, I know in China, I think they are. They identify talents in kids at a very early age, and if they show some exceptional talents, and again, maybe I don't know to what extent it's the choice of the parents to put these kids into the programs, but once they get targeted as outstanding athletes, then the sport governing bodies there put them into certain streams of certain sports because they deem them to be better at these.
Well, it's probably, I think a lot of times in our life, we don't know what our strengths are. And you might be academic, and why you maybe a mechanic, might be academic, or vice versa, or maybe you're playing the wrong sport. Probably if you're growing up in Saskatchewan, in Canada, you played hockey, but maybe that wasn't, maybe you're a basketball player, a baseball player.
Yeah, what are our aptitudes? We don't always know. We maybe just get attracted to something because of some emotional thing, but really, is it the best thing for us? Is it the thing that we can become proficient at and enjoy the satisfaction of success at, or is it going to be something that we're going to stumble through? And it's largely left up to us here in our country to pick and choose what we want to be. But
well, my son, Eli, the oldest boy, he really encouraged him to play hockey. He told me there wasn't a whole lot of other sports at that time, but they went to high school in Kinnersley and ended up playing football. Loved it. Played some junior football after that. At track and field, loved it, right? And he ended up quitting playing hockey. So you kind of get kids you hold, and I blame myself for a large part of that. But discover you don't even know what you want, really.
That's right. And and how do you find that out? You can have others test you, and determine, calculate what your skills are and what your aptitudes are, and show you the direction, things that statistically, I guess, or scientifically show that you're going to be proficient at. But maybe for some, proficiency isn't a thing. They maybe want a nice laid back, contented, easy paced life. Well, you don't get that from sports. No. It's so well suited to somebody that has some intensity and drive. And it's interesting when I was interviewed for ICR Commercial Real Estate to become an agent, the two owners at that time said that they looked very heavily on sports backgrounds. Yeah. And they, even to this day, we still continue to look at the sports background of individuals and how they did kind of geared toward real estate too.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I appreciate that completely. Well, you're busy. You got a busy day. I got one question I want to ask before we leave. Can you identify any events, a formidable event in your life that really shaped who you are today? Riding a curling route down, formidable event in your life that really shaped.
Well, I always felt my life was very eclectic. You know, I love intellectual challenges. I did very well in school. I loved all kinds of sport challenges. I enjoyed oil painting when I was a kid. For years, I did stained glass art. So I don't know that that would be one of them, because it still stands out in my mind, going down the ice, twirling on top of the stone. I would have to think, as far as curling goes, I remember in 1983 going to the World Men's Curling Championships in Duluth, because I wanted to find out. I'd never been at a national or international event. I wanted to find out what it was like to be in that environment and what the skill level was of those people. And I found out that the skill level wasn't something unattainable by me, and I liked the electric atmosphere of these big arenas and these playdowns. I thought that would be so neat to be in there. And then I remember riding the bus from the hotel to the venue in Duluth, and with a bunch of media people, got to be friends with them. And I remember telling one guy that I was so impressed by this. I said, watch out. I said, you'll see me at one of these national events. And in 1985 at the Brier in Moncton, he interviewed me, and I guess I'd forgotten about it. I had forgotten about it. He says, you know what? Remember riding a bus to Duluth? And you said that someday you'd be here. So, well, 2 years later, you're here, but they're making fun of me. And I thought, wow. So, there's some things that really took me to the next level, I would say. And that's, probably it. And as far as careers or livelihoods, I'd gone from teaching to farming, and then I went on to university and did a master's. I really enjoyed that academic challenge, and I stayed on as a lecturer for 8 years at the U of S in the College of Education.
Really?
Yes, while I was farming in Lorburn. So, I'd finish harvest, because as I indicated, the soil was lighter there. So there was time we were finished harvesting by the first weekend in September, and that's when university used to start. So I come up here for 8 years. But as I got more involved in curling, it was hard to be a lecturer. I was a full-time lecturer. I had 3 classes that I would teach, and to curl, because we were just gone for more days and time. I couldn't get time off. So, there was a number of things. And then getting into commercial real estate. And there were so many little events throughout my life that took me to different directions, and mostly because of my curiosity, my drive, my enthusiasm to meet the challenge of being good at that and understanding what that's all about. I still have that. That's what's taken me. That's what keeps me so excited about curling and the research, because it's a mystery. You don't know what's behind the next door. And so those kinds of things keep driving me. And I've opened up so many doors in my life. So it's because of the challenge, the mystery of the challenge behind that door. I love commercial real estate. Like I've told a lot of people who've thought about going into real estate, said, what is it you really enjoy about real estate? I said, I enjoy waking up every morning and not knowing what direction this day is going to take me. It's a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. I don't want the predictable, stable things day in, day out. I love to be confronted with new challenges, unique experiences, and I'm just trying to deal with them and basically meet the challenge of succeeding with the day in front of me. And yeah. You know, that's probably where my life will never change. Is there's always a challenge out there. You just have to find it.
Being challenged, being curious.
Yep. Yeah. Being brave.
Yeah, brave.
Yeah. You've got to. You're not going to win every battle, so you go out there with the understanding you may not win this battle. You're always hopeful that you will. It will. And I've been fortunate. I had to say generally, and in some form or fashion, to meet the challenges and win the battles that I've been in. And I never. Another thing that I tell people about my success with curling is because the same thing with real estate, a large extent. I don't look at the scoreboard. I just put my head down and look after doing the things that have to be done. And I feel the scoreboard looks after itself, whether it be money in your account or for winning a curling game. Just do all the small things right. The big picture looks after itself. So still,
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed the conversation. It was fun, Trent. I learned something about you that I didn't know.
Oh, there's like I said, there's a lot of history behind